All right, we are live. Welcome to this week's episode of the Weekly Rewind. This is the show where we look back at the week that was on comicbookcurious.com. I'm your host and director of content at Comic Book Curious, John Campbell. With me, returning, is my same panel from last week, because when a panel's this good, you just got to repeat it.
Word.
So we have with us again, Kristen.
Hello.
And Brendan.
Hey, a panel this good should be sealed in Mylar and again given a good protective board. And looking at your shirt, John, all I can think is sexual chocolate.
That's right, Mr. Randy Watson and sexual chocolate.
We are in the Halloween times, which has me looking at bags and bags of treats at the grocery store every time, little bite-sized things. And I think, should I get some? And then I think, you've never had in your many years of living in this apartment one trick-or-treater.
I've never had a trick-or-treater come to any of my apartments I've lived in. I don't know.
So if I got it, it would just be for myself.
Yeah, that's a bad look.
That point, it would just be hermit chocolate.
Yeah, for those not familiar, Sexual Chocolate and Mr. Randy Watson are from the Eddie Murphy classic Coming to America.
Oh, I know. There are children born not knowing that offhand.
Although, hey, they just earlier this year there was the sequel to it, Coming to America.
Yes,
which was apparently the most watched thing that Amazon has ever made. So I guess
they gave Eddie Murphy all the money.
Yeah, as they should, because Eddie Murphy's awesome. We don't have any Eddie Murphy articles this week, although I'm sure I'm but a second away from writing one at all times. So,
appropriate for the month, you should write one about Vampire in Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, a underseen Eddie Murphy movie that's more of a straightforward horror movie than it is a comedy. It's a weird movie directed by Wes Craven.
Yes.
Let's talk about some of the articles that went up on the site this week. Let's see. Where should we start? Where should we begin? Kristen, how about we start with you? You actually did a live stream of this, and then just this week, your written article came out of your profile on the Portland Comic Book Store Books with Pictures.
Yes, I got to interview the lovely Katie Pride. She was a wonderful interviewee. She did a lot of the talking, so I could just sit there quietly.
She is a wonderful lady who and that is an amazing store. Brendan, have you been in Books with Pictures?
I don't. I have not. Where is it again?
Division.
On Division. Yeah. For the audience at home, we're all three Portlanders. That's where we live. So I have no excuse why I haven't been out there, other than it's really not that conveniently located to me. But it sounds like a great store.
Yeah, I've been following her store since they opened, basically. I haven't gone in, but I had a very small child with me when she first opened, and then the pandemic. So,
it's tough. Yeah. I've been in there a few times. I was actually at their grand opening party whenever that was a few years ago.
Brag. I had all the champagne I could carry.
I occasionally, due to the circles I travel in, get invited to nerdy events here in Portland. So, and sometimes I go to them when I feel like leaving my home, which is a long distant memory now. But but anyway, they're a super cool store. But I think the thing I want to talk about with it is the whole goal of that comic book store is to be a more inclusive and open space to people who are not the traditional comic book store clientele, which I think we can all talk about being a welcome change from a lot of places we've stepped into.
I mean, I'm sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. I mean, you're male, so you clearly get the floor.
Shots fired.
And I will say, I'm still waiting on the test results, so don't go saying you're male. I'm not exactly sure yet.
There's a lot of evidence.
But I will say, I dig comic shops that change it up, because there should be, just like any other, they're all boutique. They're all usually, small owned kind of places. They should all have a different feel. I remember one that I went to in LA when it opened. That was, or not when it opened, but after it had opened, and it was J.J. Abrams' shop called Earth 2. He co-owned it, and maybe it's still around, but that place was pristine. It looked like a museum. Literally, it was all white, and everything was in these very nice, like, display boxes, including just You're just like, do I
That
touch
fits the
anything in here?
aesthetic of some J.J. Abrams stuff I've seen, so that
Yeah,
adds up.
it was very
Also,
high end. It was
definitely,
great.
but I was also like, J.J. Abrams, a comic book guy? I never would have guessed. No,
What?
literally everything about him says he likes comic books, pretty much.
But I like that places are, some of them do, sort of the more all ages feel. Clearly, just because of, again, LA reference, sorry, Meltdown in LA, which is a great comic shop, very big, but because of the interests of the owners, like a chunk of it was also a kids store. Like they had children's clothing and toys and things, and they called that Baby Melt, but it was part of, there wasn't like a dividing wall. You were in Meltdown. So over here are the Spawn action figures, and over here are like delightful onesies. And you're like, sure.
I mean, that's smart these days, and especially in a world where more and more people are letting their nerd flags fly.
Yeah.
And that's very, I mean, Kristen, you talked to Katie. I know that all ages stuff is a big part of what they want to do at Books with Pictures as well.
Yeah, she said because she wants women to feel welcomed and included, and women, as she put it, disproportionately have the responsibility of childcare. She wanted there to be a large children's section so that the kids could look at books while their mom or their caregiver was also in the store looking at books. And as a mom, of course, I always like that.
Yeah.
Is there a ball pit?
Not yet.
I'm just asking for myself. Like,
Yeah.
would I go? I always say ball pit, yay or nay. If it's nay, I don't go.
Yeah, I mean, you got to sit in the ball pit while you're reading your Spawn comics.
Right. No, I would
I
never.
feel like
Actually,
in
not
a
a fan.
COVID world, ball pits are probably never going to exist ever again.
Ever again. Yeah, I think we've seen our last ball pit.
They really shouldn't have. Like, I think
That
about how
should
much
be a post-apocalyptic like movie, The Last Ball Pit or The Final Ball Pit, and it's just like, yes, I've heard tale of these. But yeah, I like the ones also comic shops. There's some that go towards, it's not really my scene, but the ones that go towards sort of like hipster pub, where it's like, oh, right. It's like there's food and booze here and really comfy sunken couches where, yeah, go ahead and get your stuff here. So there is, I think, and should be, comic book stores of every stripe. I'm old school, and I get why the grimy nerd cave, dark comic shop thing is not, it's not inviting to a lot of people, and that shouldn't be the case. For me, I love a cluttered, but that goes for bookstores too. I love, like, I don't know, it's somewhere in the back, and you go dig through people boxes and are like, these never made it to the shelf, and you're like, how much for this? And they just go, I don't know, $5. I love that kind of stuff.
There are a few shops here in Portland where I have been in them and been like, I don't know if this is a store or a hoarder's basement. I really like, it's a total 50-50. There appears to be no one working here. Stuff is just everywhere.
I know exactly the one that you might be thinking of, and the one that I've gone to several times.
Yeah.
It was in my neighborhood.
Yeah, you have to like go down a creaky old staircase to even get to it. You're in pitch
the people
black
are
for
totally
nice,
but it is, I mean, obviously, but it is just this, it's like you say, a hoarder's paradise where you can stumble across amazing finds that they have forgotten they have.
Oh yeah. I have bought things in there where the guy was like, well, we had this. There
was an art book by of Gray Morrow, the classic comics artist, and it was autographed, and it was by him, and I was like, how much for this? He goes, oh yeah. I mean, this thing was, I think it came out like 2008 or something. He goes, oh, $25. I was like,
sold.
So I like that, but I also like an extremely clean, I mean, just basically you can tell when they care, and that comes through no matter what the aesthetic is. So yeah, Books and Pictures is on my list now. I need to go check it out.
Yeah, it's very cool, and it is very clean, well organized. They focus on new stuff, so they don't have the big back issue
Right.
bins, which adds more of the sort of boutique bookstore vibe to it. And everybody's super nice in there. Katie's really nice, and the other employees, like, it's a good place just to hang out and chat comics.
Always a good thing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to taking Max in with his gift cards and letting him pick out a couple new books, because that kid can't get enough. He loves to read. So,
what is Max? What is Max? Max is into comics.
Yeah, he really likes Miles Morales right now.
Nice.
He's still really into Wonder Woman, and we have the New 52 Wonder Woman, like the first, like Volume 1 omnibus thing.
Oh,
so he's been flipping through that.
Nice. Yeah, Brandon and I have very different feelings about that run, but we won't get into it.
No, we won't get into it. I mean, it was well done. It's just hashtag not my Wonder Woman. Also, it's a pretty dark take, but I mean, the pictures are pretty to look at. But there's a lot of beheadings and blood in there, so
he's not fazed by that.
Good. No child today should be.
Nah, they're all fine. The kids are all right.
The kids are all right. Hey, I made that argument in my my article this week myself about, man, we really do fear that kids are going to be horribly scarred by this stuff. But I mean, you go back to Grimm's fairy tales, and it's like, come on, man, they were hearing worse stuff 800 years ago. So just calm your ass down. Kids, roll with it.
They really do. Yeah.
I mean, I think the important thing is, as a parent who does have a small child, is you just have to make it make sense in their world. So if you just take the time to explain, I mean, you know, like I said, we play a lot of video games. We watch a lot of television shows, and we've been watching the 1970s Wonder Woman and Nazis. You know, we're in the first 2 seasons, and having to explain to him that's actually part of history and that happened, and having to, like, I mean, like, that was a terrible atrocity, and how is that any different, really, than reading?
You should also explain to Max that not all Nazis were that funny, because I love the fact that those early seasons of Wonder Woman, they cast all these like TV comics as their Nazis.
Right,
you're
right,
like,
yeah.
Oh, great, Henry Gibson, Nazi, and you're like, okay, great. Yeah. It's like
they also all spoke English really well.
Mars. Yes,
yeah,
with those comedic accents.
Oh yeah,
we will take the bomber over Washington, and who will stop us? This lady in tights.
They definitely were a half a click off from being Hogan's Heroes Nazis, right?
They were. But
I think I see Colonel Klink in the background. Yeah, Brendan, I know, is a big fan, and you're going to have a piece upcoming about Max's reaction to the 70s Wonder Woman show.
I can't wait to read it.
Seems to be very positive from what you've told me.
Oh, I mean, Max loves strong female leads. I mean, nice. I don't understand where this attraction comes from. But that's
good.
That's really important to him, and it's something he really likes. I mean, obviously he likes Miles Morales, he likes watching Batman, but Wonder Woman right now is his favorite superhero. So
a hero's a hero. Wonder Woman, I mean, it did coincide with my childhood. I was probably about Max's age when the original came on, and I watched it every week. Couldn't get enough of it. And, you know, now I can, of course, as an adult, you go, wow, God, cheesy. But it doesn't matter. Just like with Batman's, the 66 TV show, that was, to my childlike eyes, was like, well, that is Batman. He's doing what I want. And so it didn't matter if it was, you know, like a real take or gutsy or whatever. It's like, no, I just like good guys winning. It's like, I just like them looking out for people, because it's a comforting thing to think of. I mean, that's what the whole superhero thing kind of, I know some people do see the power fantasy of it, and some people are about, dude, if I could shoot lasers out of my eyes, it'd be all over. But really, I mean, at least for me, it was always about the costumes are cool, powers are cool, but it's all about, look what they're doing with them.
Right.
Look at what they're doing. And they don't have to, but they're helping the dude that's about to be hit by a truck.
especially
like,
for kids.
don't worry, I've stopped it. You're awesome, Wonder Woman.
No,
Especially
that's
for kids,
important.
that's how you want
You
it.
need
Yeah.
those positive role models. I mean, we can all hope that their parents are to some extent also positive role models, but like being able to see people go out of their way to help others, I think is a very important thing.
And some people find that to be really cheesy, and I just go, then you're just kind of missing the point. I mean, heroic fiction obviously has been around forever and ever and ever as well.
Right.
And it is just, I mean, these are all morality plays. It's supposed to be instructional and entertaining, aspirational. You go, well, that was a fun tale about Robin Hood or whatever. Speaking of last week's show, that's a great story of Sir Galahad. But really, it's all about what did you take away from it? It's like, oh, well, he saw a wrong and he righted it.
Right.
Or she saw wrong and righted it. So it's just all about the heroic ideal.
Totally. And since we're talking about superheroes and young audiences, let's switch over to a piece that Kinsey Campbell wrote about YA DC graphic novels. Because that has been something particularly DC Comics has really been hitting hard.
I think it's very smart.
The past couple of years. Yeah. Very.
And I've read a couple of them. They were quite good.
They get good people involved in them, right?
Do.
It's not just like whatever, toss that to whoever's around. They are getting talented people to do young adult oriented takes on iconic DC characters.
And they're also writing them to fit, I mean, lots of age ranges. Young adult covers a lot. So they will have some that are skewed, towards the lower end where it's like, man, a 10-year-old would eat this up. But I did read some of their young adult ones that are like for teens. It's like, here's a teen Bruce Wayne adventure, here's a teen Clark Kent adventure before they're Superman or whatever. And you go, wow, that was pretty great. And if I had been, I mean, it was great for me at 50, but it would have been very entertaining had I been a kid at that point. I would have eaten that up. Good stuff.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And she specifically focused on 3 of the female heroes because I know that's a big thing when there's certainly an inaccurate perception that comics are for male audiences, but I do think there is and some of this has to do back to the comic book shop discussion we were having earlier, that there's a huge shift between what audiences buy comics in comic book stores and what audiences buy comics in bookstores like a Barnes and Noble or something like that. And that's where these things really take off, particularly with young, and when I say young, I mean like the 8 to 14 crowd of female readers.
When I worked at Powell's, which is, again, for our watchers, like one of the biggest bookstore in the world now, but here in Portland, a great bookstore. And, you work all over that store, but you have a specific department. You'll still catch questions from all kinds of customers. And anytime it was like a parent that was like, well, I don't know, they kind of like this like DC superhero girls cartoon and they're looking for a thing. I was always like, well, I know exactly where to take you. And I would be able to show them like, look, it's not even just comics. These are really good little prose stories about this character, that character. And I mean, it wasn't like DC was paying me to make those recommendations. I always thought they were good. I thought Marvel, they dipped a toe. But they haven't been as fervent about it. I really enjoyed the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl novel that they did for young adults. It was very funny and just delightful. I don't know. Maybe
they've done some Miss Marvel stuff. More. I think they've done some Miles Morales ones. But yeah, DC though, it's like there's one coming out every month at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one of the Marvel ones. I got it as an audiobook for Max. It's about Loki. And so we haven't listened to it yet, but I'm looking forward to it because Loki's another one of his favorites. So
why everybody loves Loki. Everybody loves that guy.
He loved the TV show too. So
the TV show's great.
Kang. Sorry, it just comes out involuntarily.
There are times when we're just walking around and Brendan will be like, Kang! Sorry.
It'd be interesting if that were my Tourette's symptom, if I just walked around going, Kang!
But what if, as a symptom, you just walked around yelling superhero / villain names of all sorts?
MODOK! Oh, sorry, everybody. Sorry.
But
But
I
those
do
are
know
cool.
um
I'd like to read
Marvel
that
is
Mira one that she
yeah.
was talking about, because Mira, I mean, I do love that with the expanding cinematic universes, it has cast light on, everyone knows Superman and Batman, but it's great if they sit there going, "Wow, I never thought I'd be interested in Aquaman's queen, who is from an extra dimensional place and can create solid water forms." I'm like,
I mean,
great. I
I
thought I was
was
the only
always
person who knew about Mira until that
I've
movie came
always
out, and then everyone was on board.
I've always liked Mira more than Aquaman, really. Like, I think her
Okay,
power
all
set is
right.
all
Sorry, I gotta
right.
go. I gotta
I'm just saying, like, I was always reading the Aquaman comic for Mira because I think her power set is cooler.
Her power
And
set is very cool.
yeah, I mean the ability to manipulate water, that's pretty powerful as you see in there. I mean, I love the stories like she can defeat the Justice League by pulling the water out of their lungs and they collapse,
Yeah,
stuff like that. Where you're like, man, that's an insane level of power.
I love, and okay, we've talked about this before too. I'm a weirdly romantic person, and I always love the couples
Yeah,
of the various comic book universes.
sure.
So for me, it's like a partnership, and for me, you can't really have one without the other. Whenever they divorce or break up, or their children die, or the mini plot lines, soap opera plot lines that happen,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always pulling for Arthur and Mira to be happy.
Hmm.
Hawkman, Hawkwoman, they should always be together. It's like, oh man, I'm that nerd that sits there going, "Nah, I hope that Tony and Pepper are always happy." Mm.
Yeah,
Hold
yeah.
on. Let me get that down. Yeah, I always want that, because it's that's another reassuring thing. It's like Clark and Lois can't ever divorce or get really angry at each other, because I need them to be happy.
I do remember going through some real turmoil when Peter and Mary Jane were splitting up in the
Too.
comics, just being like, these aren't fun to read anymore. I
I
don't
know.
want to deal with Spider-Man's marriage collapsing.
Damn
Like,
you, Mephisto! Sorry. Which is
uh,
another Tourette's thing. Mephisto. Sorry,
yeah.
everybody.
But yeah, so I mean, I do think that is definitely cool. And these young adult comics certainly are indicate. I mean, none of the ones she talked about were. I mean, they're popular. The other two are more popular, certainly.
Catwoman, of course.
Catwoman,
Harley
and Harley
Quinn.
Quinn. But
I've
they are
got my
certain. They're
issues with.
not. I know you have your issues with Harley Quinn, but she is. I believe. I mean, at least in
She's
terms of
huge.
sales, I believe
She's
she's
huge.
second only to Batman in terms of the best-selling books at DC Comics. So,
I love the
Batman.
character. I don't. I
Yeah.
don't love her being turned into an icon for young people, because we can't erase what she is essentially, and that is a murderer, and that she defined herself for a long part of her life as the significant other of a mass murdering lunatic. So to think of her as like, she's all about girl power. I'm like, well, yeah, and slaughtering innocents. So
I mean,
I'm not quite
I
on
I do
board
I
with.
certainly the response to that I've certainly heard from a lot of big fans of Harley Quinn though is that there is a story to be told there about abusive relationships, about
No,
Stockholm
absolutely.
syndrome, about I mean like there are ways to deal with that certainly.
I think there are, and I think that would be awesome material. And I do think that any character could be redeemed. I just don't think you can remove the weight of that. And it does disturb me to see kids, tykes run around with their Harley Quinn shirts. I'm like going, well, the Joker, would I have worn him on a t-shirt as a kid? Yeah, but only if Batman was punching the crap out of him, because the Joker's awesome and cool. He is not to be emulated, except for his fashion sense. I would definitely dress like the Joker any day.
True story. My younger brother dressed like the Joker to go to a friend's wedding, and I had
Oh,
the purple jacket that he had for a while. So
wow. Wow,
Nice.
that is that's a bold move.
I will say a few years ago, oh like 8 or 9 now. Time is weird these days, but
It is.
the group of friends and I we dressed as the Batman's Rogues Gallery for
Oh, I
Halloween.
saw that picture.
We did a group costume as the Rogues Gallery. My friend
It was
Michael
good.
was the Joker, his girlfriend was Harley Quinn. Uh Writer on Comic Book Curious Mike Gergoni was Solomon Grundy. And
Yeah.
I went as Two-Face. So I had someone make me I took a black suit and a white suit, and they cut them in half and stitched them together.
What I thought
And
was really interesting was you doubled down and you actually had someone build up a latex Tommy Lee Jones face for your normal side, and I thought, wow.
It was really specific. No, but I did have somebody do prosthetic makeup to do the burns and stuff.
Yeah, it looks good, man.
We made my hair white. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was awful because it basically paralyzed half my face for the entire night. So
the whole night were you just worried about it peeling off? It's like,
Yeah.
man, I got to stop sweating because it's starting to go.
Yeah, it really held up for a couple hours, and then it was just going the rest of the night. But no, I mean there certainly is so much fun, and I think as a kid, it's the same thing we were talking about with the shows and stuff like that, right? That the implications of these characters don't read to the kids. It is the aesthetics and the attitudes.
It's true.
The girls dressing up as Harley Quinn don't think of her as a murderer. They know her from the aforementioned DC superhero squad, and stuff
right,
like that.
Exactly.
Which is a different take. And even this YA comic that Kinsey's talking about is a recontextualization and sort of new take on a Harley origin. And Harley and Ivy have become this girl power duo.
Give a child a novel and be like, well, here, this is young Harley murdering people.
Right.
Oh, she didn't murder till after she hooked up with the Joker.
Well, that's sort of the thing, like, because if
she had to go to college and become a psychiatrist, and then
yeah, I mean, because although I mean, technically, Mad Love was originally produced in the Batman Adventures comics, which was an all ages book. That's where I read it.
It's pushing boundaries of what I would. Again, I'm a crotchety old dude to be like, you can read that issue when you're 15.
I mean, that was the genius so much of the Dini and Bruce Timm stuff, though, was it always kind of skirted that edge.
That story is heartbreaking. And Harley is a great character because there is power in her. There is also so much tragedy. And you sit there going, it is heroic to find yourself again and conquer the crap that shaped you. But
I think the movies have done a really good job with that.
I think so too.
Margot Robbie's portrayal, her arc as that character,
she's so great.
In each one of those movies, they really do take her on a journey furthering that character.
She's the best thing in every movie that she has been Harley Quinn, because those aren't great movies. Except for Suicide Squad.
I was going to say, James Gunn Suicide Squad. I mean, she's great in it, but I don't know.
Yeah, she is great. Is she the best thing in it? Well, she's very close to being the best thing in it.
She's amongst the best things in it, but
it's a great movie. Thumbs up, and it's rare for me to give a DC film 2 thumbs up, but I will give that.
Yeah, this is true. Speaking of adaptations of beloved material, we have an article this week from our writer Angeli about Why the Last Man, talking about the comic book, which I believe she was reading for the first time.
Oh, interesting.
And also watching the TV show. At the same time as they've been coming out, and sort of looking at her article primarily focuses on the comic book came out in 2002, I believe, is when it started, and now the show is being made in 2021, and the world looks a lot different. So how that story changes, not just because I do also think there's a lot that changes when you obviously jump from comic books to a TV show.
Oh yeah,
but also just societally and culture wise, there's going to be a different vibe when you make something all these years later.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the comic. Did you got, but I haven't seen the show yet. Have you guys watched it?
Not yet.
Yeah, I have. I've been watching it. I've been keeping up with it. It's good. It's its own thing. It is the TV adaptation of Why the Last Man. I don't mean that as a negative. I mean, it is doing what I think an adaptation should do, which is it can't replicate the comic book, panel by panel.
They never can. I mean, Sweet Tooth was great. Sweet Tooth was different from the comic. I mean, in no huge way, but enough to where you're like, they made choices and they had to do this for this.
Same with Walking Dead. A rewrite of Sweet Tooth at the same time. Because that was part of the thing. Is when I was watching the show and doing my article on it. Because I noticed, obviously, I was doing research. I was like, oh, there are some big differences between this and that. But then I saw that they were doing like an updated version. So
Yeah, Jeff
it
Lemire
all made sense.
was also writing something called Sweet Tooth: The Return, which is kind of a reimagining of the
Yeah,
original
that.
Sweet Tooth. I haven't read it yet. It sounds interesting. I don't quite know anybody who's done anything like it.
Well, in that
Uh,
one, Sweet Tooth is actually a PI, and it's sort of a gritty noir in a
yeah,
post-apocalyptic world. Really weird.
perfect. Yeah, that'll sell. That sells these days. People love gritty noirs.
Yeah, but the fedora doesn't really fit over his antlers. Is the problem?
uh, but she specifically is talking a lot about sort of the cultural changes of it, right?
Sure.
I mean, one of the biggest differences between the show and the comic book is the inclusion of um uh what was it, like primary characters who are trans,
Hmm.
which is a big difference. The book, you know, touches on transgender characters briefly here and there, but it's really lip service, or I mean, they are sort of treated as an oddity, because for those who haven't read Why the Last Man, aren't familiar with it, the whole concept of it is there is a people would say I mean, it's a virus, but it's like in an instant every living being on the planet with a Y chromosome drops dead,
Yeah.
except for one guy and his monkey.
Yeah. So two, male at birth or male whatever.
Assigned male at birth, AMAB.
Thank you. Oh, there's an abbreviation. That makes
Yeah,
that makes
assigned female at birth is AFAB.
okay. But yeah, and
That's
it is
cooler.
it is a great comic, and one of the things I've always loved about
Yeah,
everything
one
that
of
he
my
does,
favorites. Yeah.
Brian K. Vaughan, is that he sees it as a closed story. So even if it does go for years, he knows what the end is, and he's not rambling his way there. He is aiming. He might go off on side roads, but it always comes to a very satisfying conclusion. When I got to the end of Why the Last Man, that last issue, I wept. It was
Yeah.
just unbelievable. It was so good. I would be interested in watching the show. I just pulled my earplugs out. But I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I am always a little like, well, I like this because the source material is so great. Will it
Yeah.
live up to it?
I mean, the show is very good. I mean, it makes key changes, like I said. I think a lot, some of them for cultural reasons because it's a different time, but also some of it just for television reasons. It presents a broader canvas than the comic does. It expands more to characters. It gets more into, all right, well, how does the government function post this thing? It gets into
right.
some of those kind of things. Diane Lane is great in it as Yorick's mom, who's also become the president now.
Yeah, was she the Secretary of Agriculture or something, and she gets booted all the way up to president because
It's
everyone
something
else was
like that, yeah.
dead.
But they've added new characters to where there's now political intrigue with people angling for her and stuff like that. So,
Well,
I
giving
mean,
her a storyline. I mean, she only would
Yeah.
show up sort of just very rarely in the comic, and then of course
Right.
she's at the end. But
So I would say the show is more a portrait of the world post this than just Yorick's journey, which is a major thread in the show, obviously, and he and 355 getting to Dr. Mann and trying to replicate whatever's in his DNA that made him survive.
it is so good. I am very curious to check it out. I will
Yeah.
say that it's so interesting how a lot of these things like Walking Dead, now that I've mentioned it, and this as well, it's sort of like, it's interesting that we're getting we've had these post-apocalyptic wiped out civilization type storylines that have become big, and you sit there going, and now with this pandemic, it just feels, were we calling it, or are we just sort of like going, it's a good story basis, but
it's interesting. I heard somebody talking about this, saying that kind of in times of turmoil and things like that, it crops into people's minds. You look at how many of them occurred in the 70s and stuff like
Yes.
that.
Sure.
Or in
Usually
the 80s with
more
the
environmental,
nuclear.
right? And
Yeah,
then the
right.
nuclear stuff in the 80s. Holy hell! I lived
Right, and so
through
that's
watching The Day After on TV,
yeah,
and
yeah, and I mean
that's a miniseries that'll mess you up.
there is sort of an artistic catharsis in that. It seems like, for people to sort of go like, let me present the worst case scenario.
Well, art often reflects and sometimes predicts, because I do believe in a very frou-frou way that the creative type is an open receiver, and that very often the zeitgeist is just, I'm pulling what's in the air down and I didn't plan it. And then someone goes, wow, you were really ahead of your time. And the creative person just goes, I didn't think so. I just
I
thought it
mean,
was a cool idea.
I remember immediately seeing, like, once COVID really came to the US and started spreading, suddenly there were interviews with the writer of Contagion. And I do like his attitude was like, well, it was a movie and the virus in that movie is very different. And I'm not a doctor, so I don't really know why you're calling me. Like,
I thought it was weird that they interviewed Dustin Hoffman and asked him to reply as the character he played in the film. What was
Outbreak?
That? Outbreak. I almost said
Yeah.
Contact. I'm like, no, different.
No.
Sorry.
No, that was different. Yeah. He also did Sphere. If you were
Sphere.
Best to forget Sphere, but
I don't think I even made it through. I saw it on cable. I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Good cast. Bored.
Real good cast. Yeah. Let's see what else was going on this week. Kristen, you had an article. You wrote this week's top 5.
I did.
And Brendan, I think she talked about some movies that I know both you and I have talked about in general. It was the top 5 fantasy films from the 1980s.
I saw that list. It was a good list.
What inspired you to write this top 5, Kristen?
Okay, it's gonna go back to Robin Hood again, but
please do.
When we were talking about Robin Hood in the thread, it got me thinking about other movies that I enjoyed growing up that other people had either A, never heard of, or B, had no interest in. So the movie Legend with Tom Cruise. I mean, that was not a movie that most people where I went to school or, that they had no clue what I was talking about when I was.
Well, they were missing out. That was another one of the VHSs in my house that I went to a lot. I loved Legend.
Back when the movie rental place near our house was called 49 and More, that was one of the movies my brother and I rented a lot. And eventually I bought it, like when I was older and had my own TV VCR situation.
Yeah.
Sweet.
But Labyrinth was another one of those films that I always loved. Willow. It took forever for Willow to come out on DVD. And I know that because my father bought me, found on eBay a used VHS to buy for me because we didn't own it.
Wow.
And then bought me a DVD of it as soon as he saw that it had come to DVD. So,
great.
Those are just a big part of my life. And so I always enjoyed them.
There was something in the air in the 1980s that produced these fantasy films, because I remember seeing these as a kid as well, and a lot of that decade was just, and almost all of them were box office bombs. I don't know why they just kept making them, but Legend didn't make money, Willow didn't make money. These were famously disaster movies that I feel like people closer to our age, Kristen, grew up with them as VHS movies when we had no understanding of whether or not these were they were just movies on a video store shelf.
Yeah.
And we were looking for stuff with magic and stuff, in it.
Unicorns, always good.
Off your list, I saw every single one of those in the theater when they came out. So, I'm not the reason they bombed, but it was
there. He was trying to make it.
I was trying. I went to some of those several times, but the thing is that it was the 80s where if you wanted to track that back, and I'm always the guy who's going, where's the origin? I really think
it makes sense what you write, the articles you write for our site, because that's very much what you do.
I think the 80s, spun off of, it's a combination of things, but it spun off the rise of D&D, which did become popular, truly nerdy, but still popular. Also, Conan the Barbarian, that first film was a big hit, and suddenly sword and sandal or sword and sorcery movies became a thing. They never had another huge hit, but it was putting that idea of fantasy in people's heads. And I think it happens a lot now with the superhero movie big boom. It's when in the 80s technology, special effects technology, had caught up enough to where people would always wanted to do something that had a dragon in it or whatever. We're certainly we can do it now, and it'll look pretty good.
Yeah.
And then we ended up with a bunch of fantasy films, and
I like almost all of them too. Beastmaster, I didn't even put it on my list, but I love watching Beastmaster when I was a kid.
There were a couple that weren't on your list that I did think about.
I'm glad the
still love.
never-ending story wasn't there because, again, as I said before, no, sorry, not my jam. But I know people who worship that movie.
I mean, I watched it. I watched both of
Yeah.
them. Like growing up, I remember going to my grandma's house, and that was one of the films that we would regularly have to watch there.
That one didn't make a huge impression on me either, but it's definitely one that I saw like on
Yeah.
cable and stuff like that as a kid. Some of the ones I mean, like some of the because you mentioned Conan the Barbarian, Brendan, which I loved.
It's a classic film.
But some of these were also like in standard fashion, not children's movies, because I also love John Borman's Excalibur.
Oh, Excalibur, all day, all night. Love that movie.
Which is a very R-rated take on the King Arthur story, but it's so cool.
The songs in that one aren't as good as the ones in Labyrinth, so I can see why Labyrinth would have made the list, whereas Excalibur wouldn't.
I actually don't think I watched Excalibur. And keeping in mind, like, these were movies that I watched because we had them in the house.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't in the house when I was
totally
a young child,
kind of same here. Just my dad had Excalibur.
Was very solid. It's just, and I dig the fact that someone of your generation, which I hate being the old guy, but someone of your generation that actually knows those and loves them, that warms my heart, because I mean, again, that was peak, my youth, and you're sitting there talking about these movies with the same fondness. I'm like, that's great that this would have been something your parents had at home, and then you watch them. Like, I dig this. I'm like, great.
I mean, and it's interesting because it does feel like there is a renewed interest in these movies, because you were talking about Legend. There's a brand new Arrow Video is putting out a brand new Ultimate Collector's Edition Blu-ray of Legend that comes out in a couple weeks.
That'll be like the third version of that I've bought.
I pre-ordered that.
Oh, looks like I have to buy a copy of it now.
Yeah. But then, I mean, the even bigger thing is Disney Plus is developing a Willow sequel right now.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
I read the book.
Well, we got the Dark Crystal
trilogy.
sequel series. It's unbelievable that we got one after all that time, and it was good. I know it wasn't your favorite, Kristen. I'm glad you gave it you gave it a shout out anyway. But Dark Crystal is an acquired taste. But I
think Labyrinth is the more approachable of the two.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Dark Crystal I didn't watch until I was older, because my friend wanted me to watch it with her one day, and it just didn't have the same impression. And
it is truly alien. Like, it's truly a fantasy fairy tale that has nothing for us to lock into. Right. I mean, it's not on Earth. There's not a token human walking around going, Gelflings are weird, aren't they? Yeah, there's no David Bowie and a cod piece. So, By the way, John, you remind me of the babe.
Oh. What babe?
The babe with the power.
What power?
Power of voodoo.
Hoodoo?
Voodoo.
Sorry. So fun. Yeah, but it really did feel like and we could do one about 80s sci-fi at some point too, because I do feel like there's a specific brand of 80s science fiction as well, which
I thought that was a golden age. When I was living through, I was like, look at the films coming to the theater now. And then, of course, I wait long enough and suddenly the comic books are coming to life. I'm going, I can die happy now. I can't actually, because I need to live to see Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So pretty much as soon as that's over, I think I can probably kill.
Yeah, and in between, you've got Eternals and Spider-Man. So
I know.
Yeah.
So much to look forward to and to criticize and tear down, because it's not your Spider-Man.
I never tear down. I just have opinions.
It's true.
Like, and I always respect the work that's been done, and I will usually get some enjoyment out of it. Just not the enjoyment
One of the things I like about you, Brendan, is you're nitpicky. You don't that's the thing. It's not like, this is my opinion and that's why this movie is. You're like, no, I know I'm being too harsh, or I know I'm getting in the weeds here.
But I also know that an opinion is that it is something coming from me. There might be people that agree with me and they would be right, but I also do respect that we all just have a visceral reaction to something. So I could go like my ex-girlfriend with the never ending story thing. For her, it goes right in her vein. And for me watching that with her as an adult, I was like, God, this is terrible. And I couched it nicely, but I was like, that's also
a fair point there, that some of it is the age you are when you approach it. I know that not a 80s fantasy movie, but an early 90s fantasy movie that I have a great love for. And Kristen, I don't know if you do as well. Hook, Steven Spielberg's Hook.
Yes.
See, I feel like everyone in our age range loves that movie, and yet I know, Brendan, you're not a fan. And when that
I
once
saw
again when
it
that
3
came out,
times in the theater, but
it
by
was
the third
considered
time I
a
was
disappointment.
like,
I don't understand how it could be considered a disappointment. It is an amazing film,
it's
and
a
I
great
cry
movie.
every time I watch it.
No, and I put it on for the first time in a long time a few months ago, and I was like, God, it's still great. I love
I
it.
know it doesn't lose it.
No,
I
it's
hate the
wonderful.
conceit of Peter Pan, the quintessential British child's character, being adopted and raised in America to become. I mean, I love Robin Williams. I love Robin Williams.
Perfect.
But I'm sitting there going, try for a British accent, maybe. Why is he an American? That hit me so hard.
Well, you had to
Peter
love
Pan
that
should
Dustin
not
Hoffman
be
is
an
more than
American.
going for it for a lot of people in that movie.
Oh, Dustin Hoffman. No, I mean, the cast. Don't get me started. I
Bob
love
Hoskins.
a lot of Hook. It's really down to that where I'm like going, you mess up on the foundation that makes the whole rest of the building look weird. So it might have great rooms, but that thing's going to collapse once you start thinking about Peter Pan being raised in Ohio or whatever the fuck.
I'm pretty sure he was raised in somewhere like New York. Gee,
it was something like that. But I mean, still, that's just like
it's East Coast elite sort of.
It just doesn't feel of a piece. Like, I love the idea of a sequel to anything, but you have to remain true to the roots of that thing. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, Brendan, that's a very Brendan problem to have with it. Brendan, speaking of foundational things, let's talk about what you wrote this week. The tome you.
Oh, not the email I wrote to my mom.
Oh, well, no, we can talk about that later. That's an off mic conversation.
Okay.
But no, you wrote the most epic piece you've had yet on the site about Marvel horror comics.
Yeah. Talk about stuff that goes straight in the vein. It was actually, I think I was having a similar idea about it around the time that you were like, you should do something about that. I was like, yes, because I am also working on a starter's guide to Dracula. Like I said in the article,
Kristen will be reading that very closely.
I will.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, I welcome all of that. Hopefully you're reading all of it very closely, Kristen.
Wow.
Hey,
sorry, I'm making that face.
Did you find any mistakes in this week's article?
The italics. We'll talk about it.
I had both of them pulled up at the same time. I had what John sent me, and I was looking at it like every paragraph. I was like, italics.
I'm gonna start putting in the HTML for italics. But don't worry about it. It looks great. So wonderful job all around. But yeah, I'm just a nerd for, as I said in the Venn diagram, it's like comics fans and horror fans, and it ends up in the middle, and that's me. As a kid, loving Dracula so much, I actually used to, and I didn't put this in the article, but I would buy any comic that had Dracula in it, even if at the end of it turned out to be an actor playing Dracula, where it was a fake out.
We hate a fake out. Brendan, you and I both hate a monster fake
I
out.
really do hate a fake out, and it was always disappointing to me. There was an issue of Action Comics, I think, where Superman fights Dracula and the Frankenstein's monster, and I was like, hello, I'm sorry. That's from the early 80s. I was like, I must have this. Or maybe late 70s. Anyway, so that is my deep love. And during the 70s, there was an interesting time when the comics code loosened up, and Marvel and DC both were like, we can bring back the supernatural characters that we have literally for almost 2 decades pretended just didn't exist, because they were afraid of being censored or parents groups getting up in arms. And once the shackles were off, they went crazy. But mainly Marvel, because DC, basically all they did was, back then they did all the anthology titles like House of Mystery, House of Secrets, The Witching Hour. And all they did with those was change them from Twilight Zone-y stories of a twist ending to, we're bringing monsters back. But DC didn't really create too many monster characters other than Swamp Thing and that kind of deal. Right. It was Marvel that said, hey, do you guys want a werewolf by night? How you feeling about a man thing? Want one of those? How about a man wolf?
Werewolf by Night is back in the news because Disney Plus is doing a Werewolf by Night special. I think with the possibility of it becoming a series, should people show interest.
They continue to be smart. I tend to overpraise them, but I just look at all the moves they make, and I can't say it's all Kevin Feige, but I'm sure he's got his fingerprints all over these things. But I sit there going, that's a great idea, doing a special where it's like, we're just going to do one, and we'll do it with the standard Marvel quality, and if the people like it, they'll let us know, maybe there'll be a series.
The plan is to have it out for next Halloween, so sometime around there.
Man, I can't wait.
Yeah,
I hope it's Jack Russell. Or is it the new?
It's the new one.
Okay, well, that's all right. I mean, it's a werewolf, and
we get a Marvel werewolf show.
Why not? So a lot of these characters, if you're a Marvel fan, you may, of course, have heard of those characters. Clearly, obviously, Ghost Rider and so forth.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, that's why it became a tome. It was all about within 2 years, Marvel just dumped all of these characters on you. So if you were a horror fan, it was just sort of like an embarrassment of riches. And at that point, I was probably 5 years old, 4 or 5. And so obviously very young, but I have clear memories of seeing Tomb of Dracula on the spinner rack. And I loved those. The black and white magazines was also a big experiment of that period too, because that was them going, hey, no censorship if you do a black and white magazine. Woohoo! But they never really went as far as, I always saw Marvel as like literally just dipping a toe, going, can we get away with this? There was like 2 boobs in a couple of the black and white magazines that were going, bare bosom exposure, and then like, okay, no more. But they were pretty liberal with the blood.
We've skirted the edge, but we'll stop.
Well, Savage Sword of Conan, also from the same time, they were doing those black and white magazines, and those would occasionally, I mean, obviously, lots of beheadings that you could not have in the 4-color the 4-color comics. But it was also like, and then Red Sonja, there's her boob. But it was an experimental time for them, and they were just like the Marvel Studios is doing now. They were testing. They're all going, is this something Marvel can do?
Because some worked more than others.
Spider-Man.
I mean, let's be honest. Some of them worked more than others, right, Brendan?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and some of it is, I love those characters, and I love the explosion of Marvel horror. But there was a lot of junk in there. I mean, and a lot of it was work for hire. And even the earliest, like year of Tomb of Dracula is acceptable, cheesy stuff, and then it became a really great book because
but then you have stuff, as always, that takes off almost accidentally. Like out of Tomb of Dracula comes Blade, who is still an immensely popular character to this day, more so than any of the initially central protagonists of Tomb of Dracula.
I love when you look at the sort of, you look at the big picture and you see, and it's not just Marvel, but you see the comics companies jumping on every trend and seeing what they can do. So, for instance, I talked about Ghost Rider is just, they're like, the occult's popular right now. The devil's popular right now.
The devil was big, man.
He was big. So we're bikers, motorcycle gangs and bikers are cool. So here you go, Ghost Rider. And Blade is that too. Blade is like, okay, the vampires are taking off again. Tomb of Dracula is a hit, but we need blaxploitation character in there, and he is a badass mofo. I just cussed on our live stream. I'm not taking it back. Come at me.
I mean,
come at me, parents.
Soon to get his own big MCU franchise with Mahershala Ali playing him.
So. I love that guy. And I can't wait to see a new take on Blade. Wesley Snipes is a fine Blade.
Absolutely.
And perfect for his time. We owe the Blade franchise for kicking off Marvel.
You do. I'm always that guy who's like, don't forget about Blade. He was there before X-Men or Spider-Man.
I didn't actually know he was Marvel. So.
Oh, really?
Well,
I mean, I watched the movie, 100 years ago or whenever it first came out.
1998, but
the Blade trilogy is not my idea of Marvel's Dracula, but still,
the entirety of that third Blade movie is best left forgotten.
Yeah, I don't actually know if I watched that one. I know I watched
the first
one.
You don't
yeah, the second one is the best one, though. I mean,
absolutely.
directed it. That one really is awesome.
But
That's the
he's
one I
a
go
great
back to.
character.
Well, the first one's really good too.
And yeah, he came out of Tomb of Dracula, just
Yeah.
like Moon Knight, who's about to get his own TV show, came out of Werewolf by
Yes.
Night.
Yes.
I love
Lest
pointing
we
out, like,
forget.
you may, not care about Jack Russell Werewolf by Night, but you're sitting going, we got Tigra and we got Moon Knight out of
Right.
that comic.
Right.
And obviously Son of Satan came out of Ghost Rider. So
Then Son of Satan, they took a run at doing a show of recently with Hellstrom.
Yeah, that was for
Hulu.
Yeah, for Hulu.
Yeah.
I again took a stab at it, but the whole thing is it veered far enough away from the source material that I'm like, well, why bother? It could just be just another like spooky, like evil, that kind of show or something. Why not go full bore and have him?
I mean, Damien Hellstrom in the comics is such a wild character.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, I mean, I think the whole problem with what ended up happening with just getting rid of all that stuff with a lot of those non-Marvel produced shows like that were made by Marvel Television.
Yeah.
Was they were very TV.
That's the problem.
They didn't feel like an extension of the comics or the movies. They were sort of their own thing. It was like, oh, well, this is like, like you're saying, it's like any other supernatural TV show.
They were weak sauce.
Yeah. I mean, there were some. I mean, I think Runaways was the best of that group by far.
I never actually watched Runaways or
Runaways
Cloak and Dagger. Those are the two I never saw.
Cloak and Dagger wasn't bad either, actually. Those ones were okay. Because I do feel like those also worked better as standalone things.
Mm-hmm.
Like Cloak and Dagger and Runaways kind of can exist on their own as teen dramas. Like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, you don't have the Runaways run into Captain America like they do in the comics.
They should.
Yeah. But they would acknowledge, like, oh, those superheroes in New York or something like that real quick,
I love any shout out, but I also am the guy who sat there watching Jessica Jones, enjoying it thoroughly. But every time Patsy Walker was on screen, I'm thinking, Hellcat!
Yeah.
Every time she
and
was
then
there, I was like,
he was shouting,
she will
Hellcat.
marry Son of Satan. And they never got to that storyline. I'm sure they were going to.
Oh, obviously, that was her
and the cat mask and going to hell and then marrying the Son of Satan. Oh,
yes.
Again, working on my my fan fiction spinoff.
Indeed.
But no, it's a great and of course very seasonally appropriate. It was a fun article to write, and I encourage anyone that also loves that stuff. If you are a horror fan that loves comics, go back to the 70s. There was some really awesome stuff they were creating.
I was always bummed that they didn't really nail Frankenstein. I do think that was sort of a missed opportunity because I do love the Frankenstein monster the most of the classic monsters. And that comic.
I have nothing to say about all of the versions that have come after, and none of them are good.
Well, it's pretty true. There's no consensus on what take they're going to do, and it's even more apparent if you read, like, for instance, his entire run, which is. This wasn't for the article. I had mentioned to John that I had gotten the complete collection trade paperback that was all of Marvel's Monster Frankenstein comics. And I haven't read those since I was a kid, since the 70s. And when you read them back to back, you're like, wow. Every 4 issues, they'd bring in a new writer who had a whole new idea. So it was like, I will destroy all the entire Frankenstein clan. And then he's like, I like petting pretty deer. And you're like, what?
Yeah, this doesn't jibe with anything. Yeah.
Now it's just thought balloons, and he is intelligent, but he can't speak anymore. He's mute. And you're like, what are you doing? He's in the past. He's in the present. He's meeting Spider-Man. They all met Spider-Man. That was
I saw that.
That's actually one of my favorite parts of your article is when you had the covers of Spider-Man with everybody.
I could not find a cover of him with Son of Satan, and I didn't want to do a panel.
Right.
There was actually a Marvel team up with him and Satana, who is the Son of Satan's sister, but I didn't feel that would be appropriate because I did not speak of her explicitly in the article.
No.
But no, I love that. It basically that's their thing. Just like everyone meets Batman at DC, if they introduce a new character or there's a crossover, there will be Batman will be the first person they meet. Right. So at Marvel, it was always like, new character, here's Spider-Man. It's like going, I don't know what to do. It's
Well,
a
it was
werewolf.
it was like the actual policy of Marvel in the 90s. I know you know this, Brendan, was if any book was flagging in sales, they just put Wolverine in it.
Yeah, get Logan
Literally,
in there.
any book that started to slip in sales, they would just have Wolverine guest star because he was
weirdly
so
the
popular.
ones you would think were ridiculous that wouldn't work were pretty great. When it was Power Pack and Wolverine, it was great.
Well, like Wolverine and a kid's superhero
taking care of kids superheroes is like, oh, this is really good.
But yeah, that was actually the thing. Was like, what's that? Wolverine joins the team for a little bit. That'll boost some sales. I don't think it saved any books per se, but because eventually he had to go back to the X-Men.
Yeah, Wolverine Dazzler wasn't a great comic.
Christmas Dracula in the chat. X-Men Star Trek The Next Generation crossover. Yes, one of the single weirdest things ever, because it has to retcon that the X-Men are aliens from a planet of mutants, and they meet the crew of the Enterprise, and it's technically two Patrick Stewarts then.
I never read any of those, like those novels, weird. Planet X and all that stuff. I would see those.
Peter David, I believe, is the one who wrote those, who is great. And
Peter
great
David's
X-Men,
an amazing writer.
And I mean, he wrote a lot of the Star Trek novels in general and great comics as well. So it was but it was just, it was the early 90s defined, which as a kid, those were my two big obsessions, were Star Trek and the X-Men. So I was like, oh my God.
I think one of the
finally
websites,
Riker's talking to Cyclops.
Maybe CBR recently did an article just about the weird crossovers of Star Trek with the X-Men.
Yeah. There was also a weird Star Trek Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover. That was mostly just action figures of the turtles.
In
the classic Trek app, because they were both owned by Playmates Toys. So just, it's another thing where it's like, turtles sell, Star Trek sells, put them together.
Well, they also did a line of turtles as classic monsters, because I remember there was like a Dracula Leonardo or something.
That was where turtles sold so well as action figures. They were just desperate to do anything.
Now they're cowboys. Now they're pretty princesses.
Yeah.
That was an interesting line.
Interesting line, yeah.
The turtles is pretty princesses.
Old for its time. All right, the last thing I want to talk about, and I've been reserving talking about it because I'm always about to talk about, is James Bond. And this is, the article I wrote this week. Brandon spent enough time with me to know that I am a Bond super fan.
Yep.
I worship this franchise. And Brendan, I know you're a fan as well. Kristen, what's your familiarity with the adventures of Agent 007?
Well, I've watched some of the older movies. Pierce Brosnan was probably the first one that I saw, but I was never a Pierce Brosnan fan.
Okay.
And then I remember seeing Casino Royale in theaters and sitting there laughing at how cheesy it was, and people glaring at me because I had the giggles. And so I was just like, well, apparently I am not a good James Bond fan.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would have been one of those people.
Cheesy.
Yeah, which is interesting because that was meant to be the grounding, serious, gritty one. So that is an interesting reaction.
In Kristen's favor, any scenes of parkour crack her up. You show parkour in a film, she's gone.
Hilarious. No, it was the scene where they're sitting by the pool and his love interest leans over and she's like, James, you're putting your armor back on. He goes, I can't. You've stripped me of my armor. And I'm over here just like,
okay,
laughing.
Pretty much every Bond movie is going to have some groaners. That's also true to the series.
I actually
I didn't know that. So.
I really like that scene a lot. Actually, I don't find that to be a groan.
Okay, John, take
Casino Royale. By the way,
step back.
In my starter guide, I says Casino Royale is the one that you should start with if you're new to the franchise. It is designed as the origin story. It is meant to be the first outing of James Bond. It is a great introduction of the character because the movie pretty much assumes you don't know. It's introducing him as if he's a brand new character.
I will say that, especially for for watchers now, it would be probably the wrong move to go back to classic Bond, simply because they're dated. They are of their period.
Oh, very much so.
They might enjoy it, but it would definitely be a cheesy experience. And they go, yeah, that's just not my thing.
That's where
John Wick.
I think
Show them Casino Royale.
a grounding in the modern and understanding of the character, because it is almost like Christmas Dracula is once again saying, we have a couple people saying they don't like the older ones. I do love the older ones, but they are, once again, of their time, is very accurate. And that means a number of things. Christmas Dracula brings up the pacing is slower, but also something we were talking about with Why the Last Man. Yeah, the gender roles, the politics of it.
Everything's troublesome. Everything is very troublesome.
There you go. Zumbini says in the chat, a little aggressive with the ladies. Oh, yes. Sean Connery had a firm hand with the women that definitely does not age well. And there are scenes that are very uncomfortable to watch. And being a massive Bond fan, any Bond fan has to kind of reckon with that. And if you're a fan of the novels written in the 50s before the movies, it's worse. It's way worse than the novels.
Yeah, that's what I'd say, is that they were being, sadly, true to the period, their own period that they were making the films, and that idea of masculinity.
Yeah.
But Bond was always an ultra version of any of that anyway. But then you go back to the books and it is worse. It's almost like they're shaving the rough edges off with each iteration.
They are.
And they have to keep some rough edges, sadly, because Bond is supposed to be a troublesome character to some degree.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that they have made some moves.
But I think the Craig movies have done a really good job with making the rough edges of him true character flaws. His drinking, his womanizing. These are things about the character, but the movie can bring them up as troubled parts of his personality.
Well, they
have a psychological grounding and reasoning for.
They also have they very smartly made him aware of it. That's the thing, is that it's not enough that they're showing that, it's affected his personality. They're also allowing him to go. There's reflective moments in the Craig Bonds where he's like going, yeah, I'm out of date. I'm wrong. And this is a terrible life I'm living. And I don't want a completely, self-aware Bond, but enough of that where he knows his attitudes they're not in step.
Right.
It's a healthy, he's becoming healthier Bond, though I'm sure he'll still be smoking and drinking aplenty when we see him next, whoever may be playing him.
I mean, there are certain things about the character that you kind of can't get rid of without making him a different character, right? You can. I think the key is what they've done, and they started it really with Brosnan, and then very much continued with Craig.
Right.
Is the world around him is changing. He is a dinosaur of a sort.
Well, they had full on. They had Dame
Judi Dench.
Judi Dench, thank you. Telling him you're a dinosaur, which is just straight up. She's like going, you are a horrible thing left over from the Cold War.
I believe she calls him a misogynistic dinosaur in Goldeneye.
And good point, Christmas Dracula. I have just now realized there were people commenting while we were talking.
Yeah.
But James Bond was based on Rodal and of course Ian Fleming's own espionage World War II past. They had both been involved in that stuff, so they were good friends.
Roald Dahl also wrote one of the Bond movies. He wrote the screenplay for You Only Live Twice. Which is interesting. That one did not make my list on the starter guide. I said if you're going to do a Connery, Goldfinger, I think, is the sort of the platonic ideal of that 60s Connery era. That's where I think the franchise becomes what it is.
Everything clicks. I mean, Dr. No is great. I mean, I like a lot of the
From Russia with Love From Russia with Love did make one of my honorable mentions at the end.
From Russia with Love is actually one of the closest to an actual spy story. It has actual espionage in it, and it's not crazy gadget heavy, so I love it.
It's a lot of fun. I did try to get different Bonds on there, and I did put in.
I think you did a fine job.
Thank you. I
You
did,
put
but
On
I
Her
did.
Majesty's Secret Service in there, and
I
that's
did put
very
On Her
divisive.
Majesty's Secret Service. It is very divisive, and it's a movie I've even come around on and watched enough that I wrote it off for years, but have watched it enough to be like, it's good. And I think Lazenby shows promise. He
He
is
shows
certainly the
promise. He's
weakest
not there
Bond,
yet.
but I think had he been given another movie or two, he could have really gotten into that character. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, George Lazenby replaced Sean Connery for only one movie and was sort of seen as a disaster at the time. And I think now there are fans who have more respect for what he did with the part, and more particularly the movie. I think if that was Connery, I've said this before, I think if Connery was in On Her Majesty's Secret Service,
That would
be remembered as the best one of the whole bunch.
Except for they also would have to recast Blofeld.
Yeah, Telly Savalas' Blofeld is not amazing, but a lot of that is made up with having Diana Rigg.
But you got Diana Rigg! Oh, yeah. Of course, the only woman that Bond would fall for and marry and then sadly lose almost instantly. The amazing Diana Rigg.
Spoilers for a movie from a long time ago, but yeah, she is shot immediately after marrying James Bond.
Did I?
Well, now I can't watch that movie, Brendan.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, you should watch
and unfortunately, that's one of the scenes that Lazenby doesn't work in. The emotional stuff.
He cries enough.
Well, it's all right, but I'm just saying, like, it's the emotional stuff and some of the more charming aspects of the character that he needed to work on. He was very good at the action and the physicality.
That guy's throwing people left and right.
Yeah, he looks great. I mean, I love that shot when they do the push in on him as he pulls the knife up. That's sort of the iconic look. Look, I also have, as you know, Brendan, a great affinity for Roger Moore, who that was me as a kid. Once again, when we talked about that, like when I was a kid, it was the Roger Moore movies I was watching and loving. And those are the ones I will say that if you're going to show it to a kid, Roger Moore is not a bad entry to it. Those are the more all ages friendly James Bond movies.
Yeah, especially the mid and later ones, or I guess maybe the mid ones, because it starts pretty brutal.
Another one of my honorable mentions is his first outing, Live and Let Die.
I do like
although the one that made my starter guide is once again the one I think that coheres the Moore run is The Spy Who Loved Me. I think that's the one that is the best mix of enough spy adventure and some humor as well before it tips too far one way. I feel
really sad for Kristen because she's sitting here just listening to Bond talk, and she's like going, "Yeah, not a big fan. Yeah, no, sorry
about that, Kristen."
That's okay.
It's
I
like
mean,
I said,
my uncle sent me a message, and because he's watching, and he brought up a really good point about Ian Fleming being gay and how that influenced his writing of the Bond character as well.
There's a lot of weird. I don't know if Ian Fleming is. I mean, he had some weird sexual.
I think he was very open and experimental. I think he probably would fall under pansexual.
I think that's right. But in the books, there's a lot of homophobia, which I think may lead to also some self-hating.
But I mean, that would definitely have been a product of the time he was writing.
Yes, as well. Yes. There's a lot of.
I was wondering if maybe that's why Bond had so many ladies, because in some effort to.
Yeah,
and also I mean, I've never read the book, so
no. There's also unfortunately a number of incidents of Bond turning lesbian straight in the books, which is just not great. And that luckily none of that found its way into the movies.
Well, because they it wouldn't be whitewashed, but they pasted over straight-washed Pussy Galore to where she was she had her flying circus of all women pilots and lady pilots, and yet you're like, are they implying something? No, she kind of falls for him pretty quick.
In the book, Pussy Galore is very much a lesbian,
full-on lesbian, and then she
meets James Bond.
He's like, I only liked ladies before, but there's something about you, James Bond.
It's unfortunate, but whatever possible
problematic is what we're going to say about the entire Bond franchise.
But I think your uncle does make an interesting point about reading into some of that stuff as Fleming wrestling with his own feelings and place in society at that time of that kind of stuff. plays into, I think, some of
it,
the random anger towards homosexuality in those books.
But from what I know, I mean, yes, I think he had complicated feelings. At the same time, I think he was pretty unabashed, which is one of the reasons why he's like going, yeah, I'm going to move myself and my wife down to Jamaica. We're going to have this estate and we're going to get up to all kinds of shenanigans. Yeah. I think he was pretty much like a very openly, just very sexual person. But all of his proclivities and maybe conflicted feelings, it's all there on the page. And I'm sure there are multiple college papers that have been written about, psychoanalyzing the Bond books. It would
there's no question that Bond was created as this sort of ideal of what he wanted to be. He saw himself as James Bond. Because all of his
actual amazing espionage adventures in World War II that, of course, aren't Bond. He took what he knew and then he just cartoonized. He just expanded it.
His interest in cars and fine liquors and cigars and and that kind of and suits and baccarat, which it's that's certainly one of the biggest differences when you go watch the Casino Royale movie versus the novel. He's playing Texas Hold'em poker in the movie, where he is very much playing baccarat in the book. But people don't really know
Daniel
baccarat
Craig,
these
they're
days.
Like, no one gives a shit about baccarat, so let's make it poker, okay? All right.
I mean, poker definitely just sounds more approachable than baccarat.
Although baccarat is a much simpler game, but it's just unfamiliar to people.
I don't really know what it is.
It's pretty out of. You can see it being played in some of the older Bond movies. It's not as prevalent to the plot as it is in Casino Royale, but you can. I mean, the very first moment we meet James Bond in a James Bond movie in Dr. No, he is playing baccarat.
I think some guy on a YouTube thing did the Bond tour where he replicated all of Bond's travels, because Ian Fleming wrote them in such specific detail, what car he's driving, where he would go from this place to this place. So this fan, he rented all of every time he'd go to a different place, he would rent the specific model of car, and then he would drive the route. So he went through all the books, apparently doing, replicating Bond's travels, stopping at the same hotels and doing all that stuff. That's taking fandom to a certain level.
Like I said, I'm a pure Bond aficionado and super fan, but that's too far even for me.
I'm not going to the North Pole and throwing a big green crystal into the frozen waste.
As a Superman fan,
I mean, I'm a Superman fan, but I'm not going to try and replicate the Fortress of Solitude.
So
I don't like leaving my house, so
that involves leaving the house.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the fun of the Bond.
Cold.
Sort of the fun of the Bond movies for me is I don't have to leave my house to go to exotic locales and cool casinos. And I mean, like, you can escape into that world for 2+ hours.
I do love the Bond films, and I do understand that for some, like Kristen, it's gonna, especially the older ones, will be cheesy and goofy. And I also understand when you have a deep fan relationship to something, doesn't mean you're blind to its faults, I think.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, John is totally aware, as am I. It's like I have some of the books, I've read them, and I go, wow, hello, 1955. But yeah, they're very outdated, very problematic. And then you kind of try and step around it and find the core that is still the thing that you loved.
Because, I mean,
great adventures.
There's something there, because the reason we obviously we ran the starter guide this week is because yesterday the newest James Bond movie came out in theaters here in the US, which is the 25th entry in the franchise, and next year will be the 60th anniversary of the first movie. So it is the longest running franchise in the history of film. So there's something.
When are you going, John?
I'm going on Monday.
All right.
Yeah.
See if I can get some tickets.
I can't wait. Very excited for that. But yeah, and this is of course the final outing of Daniel Craig as James Bond, which we did put in our very clickbaity title this week of "Is Daniel Craig the best James Bond?"
Ooh, I would click on that article.
I mean, I'm gonna just say yes because I like Daniel Craig, but with very little Bond
Right.
experience.
Yeah.
I mean, what does my opinion really count?
I'm still a
I
Connery
think
man, but Craig is a close second.
I think objectively he gets there. I mean, I have my childhood love of Roger Moore, and I grew up in the '90s, so also the ones I was seeing in the theater were the Pierce Brosnan ones,
I like those
which
too.
I love Pierce Brosnan.
I like
Kristen,
all the
not a
Bonds.
Brosnan fan. That's I mean, and that's the thing for me. Once again, being such a huge fan is I do love them all, even the bad ones. I do kind of love. I can give it up for a Moonraker. I can go for a Die Another Day.
I want to
They're
shout
not the
out
ones I go to the most, but
to our people in the chat, Christmas Dracula and Zumbini, both being hermits.
yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
you. I feel
Yeah.
you.
Totally support that.
Count me as a brother that never leaves the house.
There's a reason we do this here from our own homes. Yes, actually. Yes, and Zamboni Lass is also agreeing with this. So yes, we're all shut-ins. I'm so glad we could have this meeting.
We're all just keeping Postmates in business. Here's Anya.
Indeed. Yeah. So Die Another Day, the Diamond in the Face villain. Yes, I'm glad you brought up Diamond in the Face villain. Christmas Dracula. That character's name is Zhao. Why is his name not Diamond Face? I don't. It's just for the Bond. I mean that upset me as a kid seeing that movie when I was like, but he should be Diamond Face. This is a franchise that has Goldfinger.
Another day.
I did like the music.
I guess sorry.
And
not a fan of that theme.
I mean, something we may do at some point are like the best James Bond songs or something like that.
I thought you meant we were going to do like karaoke on one of these weekly recaps where we all have to sing our favorite James Bond song.
I have the full James Bond soundtracky collection, so I often will just go through Bond theme to Bond theme, singing along. Yep. Even the ones I'm not a huge fan of, like I Guess I'll Die Another Day.
Do you dance
Madonna.
too?
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly like that for all of them.
Perfect. I'm totally there.
Who
was the villain who like cried blood or would have like
that is Le Chiffre.
Yeah.
From
French for the goat.
Yeah. Zamboni Last brings up DMCA on that. He would have to be singing it correctly, I think, for it to really be a problem.
Dude,
so I think we're good.
And I'd need to sing about 20 more seconds. So I think we're fine. Zamboni Lass is going to turn me in.
I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. Texting the FBI.
Yeah. So let's see what's that's a lot of the stuff that we were talking about this week on the website. We've got some exciting stuff in the works for next week. Kristen, you and I are currently going through articles right now. We've got and Brendan, I don't think it's next week, but it's the week after that you'll have your Dracula starter guide.
My Dracula starter guide.
I can't wait to talk about that one. I'm so
I can't wait either.
Indeed, but next week I know our buddy Captain Chris has and I just read it this morning, a very extensive rundown of the Halloween franchise.
Oh boy!
So he bless that man. He watched all of those movies recently. Every Halloween movie he shotgunned for that. So
has he seen Halloween Kills?
He's not seen Halloween Kills yet. That is time to come out before Halloween Kills, which comes out next Friday, which I'm very excited about, the new entry in the Halloween franchise.
Me too.
So we'll have more. I'm sure we'll end up talking about that next week.
Do y'all think I should take Max to see that one?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I think you should start him on the best of the series, which is Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
Okay.
You know what? I'll give you a little preview. That was Chris's favorite. No joke.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. No, I'm not. He really loves Season of the Witch. So
I mean, I love it too.
There's a reason to check out that article when it comes out on Monday on comicbookcurious.com. Everybody, find out why Chris thinks Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Halloween 1 is the easiest to start on. Is right.
And it is the best.
Zombunny last, but his favorite of the bunch was Halloween 3. Yeah. So
that's an interesting take.
It's a strange movie. But
I like it.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen. I mean, I haven't. I only watched the first one and then the remake, like the Rob
Zombie one.
Yeah.
The remake. Sorry.
I mean, I saw that in theaters with friends.
The Rob Zombie one is it's very Rob Zombie. So
it is very.
I would say if you enjoy his work, you'll probably like it. But it is very different. But so we'll have all that as we continue to cover horror stuff throughout October here. But hey, thanks everybody for watching. This is always a lot of fun. Brendan, Kristen, pleasure to have you on here. We'll drag some more of our writers onto the show as it goes on. But of course, this will be happening every Saturday at 5 here on Comic Book Curious. And please check out comicbookcurious.com for all the articles we're talking about. Plus, we put out new articles every day, Monday through Friday. So check that out. You can also find us at Comic Book Curious on the various social medias. So be sure to follow us on there. And exciting news next week, officially next week, I can say this. The Comic Book Curious Podcast Network is starting. The official Comic Book Curious podcast is out right now with our introductory episode 0. So subscribe to that on whatever podcatching software you use. But we're going to have more shows, including Brendan and I. If you really love us talking about monsters, you'll be able to hear us every week talking about classic monsters on Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters.
And doing some very, very problematic impressions.
Oh, even better.
Yeah. Well, we are I mean, some of it is the subject matter, right? We are talking about movies from the 1930s. Yeah. So, yes, those movies wade into some subject matter that's not
from Brendan's childhood.
Oh! Wow.
You, Kristen, have basically created a Great Depression in me. See what I did there? 1930s.
I did.
Yeah.
I got it.
Well done. Well played, sir.
Thank you.
But so check us out. And also, we're going to have more awesome live stream content throughout the week from here. Captain Chris, Kristen, when is he gaming? Do we know?
At some point.
Yeah.
I know he games on Friday nights from what was it? 4 to 6, I think. Or 3 to 5. I can't remember.
Pay attention. 3 to 5. Pay attention to. He's also going to be doing Magic the Gathering. Yes.
And he's been playing Friday the 13th. Yeah.
And also Friday the 13th. So be sure to check that out. Pay attention to our social media because we'll keep everybody updated about that there. But we have lots more content and some new shows in development that I can't even talk about yet, but they're exciting. So be sure to pay attention to us and subscribe to us on whatever you're watching this on right now. So you don't miss an episode of any of this stuff because it's very exciting. But thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. That's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Weekly Rewind. Stay curious, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.